journalist and the creator of Rawkblog.net. Every week, I'll be talking to smart, funny people about the most interesting things in music, the internet, and pop culture. It will be raw, unedited, and hopefully pretty silly. You're going to love it. Today, my guests are Chris Ott, who has written for Pitchfork, One Week, One Band, and also his own site, shallowrewards.tumblr.com, and Paul de Revere, who contributes to Consequence of Sound, Time.com, and a number of other publications. Gentlemen, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
So today we're going to talk about Pitchfork Fest, which just happened. Paul was there. How was it? What was your experience like?
It was great. I mean, overall, it was great, and even despite some inclement weather, the organizers really had their shit together. You know, sets were maybe a little bit late, if not on time or early. I think it's one of the best festivals in the nation. You know, Chicago in the summer is just a great place for music, period.
And you went last year as well.
I went last year.
So how did this year's compare?
The weather wasn't as agreeable. But because it rained, it was still as hot, if not hotter. And the acts were definitely more rap-oriented. There was even more rap. Like, it's really interesting, like, how the whole cloud rap, Tumblr rap thing has really made this undeniable stamp, this undeniable mark on what Pitchfork covers and just the indie universe in general, quote unquote.
Yeah, I agree.
It's really interesting. I mean, like, Danny Brown made basically his first ever widely seen public performance at Pitchfork last year during Das Racist's set, which I was there for, and then he was like a way high up headliner, I think right before Grimes, and you know,
in just a year.
In a year, Grimes got a headlining set above Godspeed You Black Emperor, technically, for the day. Yeah, above Godspeed You Black Emperor. In the matter of less than 6 months, so there's a lot of like really new blood, and a lot of that are very much have their music and their personas based in social media very intensely, and a lot of that is cloud rap, is like Tumblr rap, or I like to call it smartphone rap. But,
right.
But yeah.
Chris, is that something you're observing as well, kind of the hip-hop influence, which has been something that's been part of Pitchfork for a long time, but it seems like now it's really becoming more dominant?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's going on, and it's not, I don't necessarily think it's new, and I don't mean it as a slight to anybody, but one of the things, like, people love to give Pitchfork shit for trying to jump out early on stuff or get their hands on a band's reputation and all this stuff, and it's kind of a cynical way of framing the fact that the site's always been about getting new, exciting music to a wider audience. And I think a lot of times people miss that because there's a huge contingent of people who are, you know, envious of the site's position. There's another contingent that really loathes their, you know, semi-control over, let's say, this, Billy Corgan. Not real happy about Pitchfork's, you know, reputation in the, you know, the market platform it's created. But no, I think that what they've done, and if you look at it, it's always the current bands and whatever is big in like the Tumblr type demographic, they're always trying to book them. And some of the bands are a little bit suspect of it and they don't go that way. But at this point, I think that's kind of a mistake, because if you look at Coachella now is like what Lollapalooza 5 was. It's just, I mean, Coachella is doing something really crazy with this yacht thing, and I hope it works for them. But if you look at the bands they're drawing, they're some of the most heavily PR'd, heavily managed, you know, handheld bands that are active right now. And so those are bands that come from the top down and get slammed on kids' heads, whether kids want to hear them or not. And you know, to go full circle, I think what happens with Pitchfork is they give bands who may not even have a fucking clue what they're doing a shot to go out and play in front of, you know, what is it, 20,000 or something more? I don't know.
Well, right. King Cruel is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Those kids, they're literally kids. I mean, they're like none of them are above the age of 20. I don't think anyone in that band. Archie's like 19 tops, or I'm trying to recall. But
yeah,
I think that's great about Pitchfork. I think Pitchfork really does take some genuine chances, which is really awesome. I think one thing it's kind of, you might say, led the charge on with Brandon Stussy as a writer is the dark physical music of like really like crusty punk and black metal and noisy psychedelic proggy stuff. Yeah.
I mean, wasn't the consensus that the Atlas Moth was the strongest performance kind of the weekend?
Of one of those days, of that day, certainly.
Yeah.
But I mean, Atlas Moth, I was watching Psychic Paramount at the same time because I've been a fan of theirs for a while and I love them. But also like Ice Age, Japan Droids could be sort of included in that in the sense that they're just like a mosh pit band and they put on an amazing set. I mean, like who else? I mean, like they just. That's one thing that I think was also more pronounced in this festival was just that dark physical music, again, punk, noise, metal, hardcore, like influence stuff.
And cloud rap, which is really funny. And like Grimes, who's very, making very spacey kind of almost ambient music.
Yeah,
kind of these two extremes.
He's at the forefront of the entire, post-internet, whatever the hell you want to call it. But the second generation, and this is something I've been talking to like everybody in our peer group about for the last 2 weeks, the second generation of internet music, which is really the first generation in a lot of ways of internet music, is like squarely here. Mm-hmm. And people like us and, definitely everybody I know from the, first days at Pitchfork, we're the old guard. I have a Cure poster. I have a Cure poster in my basement. Mm-hmm. I have like a New Order poster in my basement. This stuff is like, that's like talking about, Led Zeppelin or fucking Blue Oyster Cult to a kid today. It's just distant, ancient, giant monolith stuff. So, Grimes she's the flashpoint, and I made a joke on Twitter. I called her Pet Cemetery Cyndi Lauper. It's like you take somebody who had Cyndi Lauper's kind of like completely insane metatextual whatever, the grab bag philosophy, and Madonna used it to an extent too. Grimes is totally clocking that. Claire's like, she's just a creative person, right?
Yeah.
I don't know her, to call her by her first name. She's a kid. From my vantage, I'm 36 years old. But I look at her music and I celebrate what she's doing because the same way I celebrate like Elite Gymnastics and a lot of these other bands, they're trying to do something new without regard for the past. And our generation didn't do that. You look at even like Block Party, they sound like, The Cure, U2, whatever.
Puppy.
Hey, it's my daughter.
Hey.
Hold on, honey. And so I think, for me, she's the one that's getting the most focus, and Danny Brown is as well on the true like core hip hop side.
What's your thing, Mommy?
You're gonna have to do some editing, dude.
No, we're all good.
This is a microphone, honey. So I think they're that real first generation that grew up with the internet, that grew up with unlimited free music, and this is what they're feeding back to us.
Can I see this microphone?
You can see it, yeah. All right, I'm gonna mute for 1 sec, guys. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no worries. That's interesting because we did go through that whole period of all the sort of rock revival of the early 2000s and band, Interpol sounding just like Joy Division and all that kind of stuff.
And Strokes sounding just like Television and
all those bands.
But here's what's interesting though, like if you really root through the sound enough, if you really like root through their sounds enough, I think even these really new bands, if you root through their sounds enough, you'll find some vague line of breadcrumbs to stuff in the 80s, maybe even 70s or 60s. I mean, even Grizzly Bear or even Animal Collective through all of that crazy haze. Those guys.
It's not entirely. No one is making music that is entirely new. I mean, even Grimes is making 4/4 beat music. I mean, she's just doing a sort of more spaced out version of it. But you can trace her back to Aphex Twin or Bjork or whoever it is.
Who are we tracing back to, Bjork?
Oh, we were talking about some of these current bands. I don't think anyone is doing something entirely new. I mean, even Grimes, she's making beat music. I mean, you can go back and she probably grew up listening to, Aphex Twin or Bjork or whoever it was.
Yeah, no, the qualifier new, it's like, is anything new? Has anything ever been new? I just mean like the way that they don't fucking care about cultural mores. They don't give a shit what Aphex Twin used to mean. That's that whole thing, like when Skrillex posts Flim is my favorite song, and these kids are like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, that's what's exciting to me about these captured tracks bands, because they're all doing their own version of, The Cure or Joy Division and these kind of 80s groups. And it's interesting to me because most of them have focused on the really melodic aspects of that. Like a band like Wild Nothing, it's like they just have the Cure singles collection, and they're like, let's do that, Yeah, and so that's really exciting. I think all those bands are great.
Yeah, and we talked before, and I think everybody has started to talk about Dive in those terms, and I think kids sort of wanted a band that had that wasn't just like post-punk trying to be the pop group or, death dance, death disco, all that shit. People were really tired of the angular, posy Gang of Four stepchildren, and I think they wanted a band that wasn't like shoegaze C86 jangle, but had some kind of, rock footing under it. And I think the Real Estate were too cutesy. I think they were too
Not
cutesy.
for me.
Yeah, I know, but I think that's why people are responding to Dive, where Real Estate has kind of, it's
very immersive. It's very dark.
It's a horrible thing to say that Real Estate has peaked. That's a shitty thing to say because they're a good band, they're a working band, but I don't know that they can cross over to a higher, level of commercial success than they've already attained. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that Dive can't, but they're so young, they don't fucking care.
Well, Real Estate, I should say this. Real Estate never got my pulse going because I feel like there's so much more they could do with their sound, and because frankly they're just kind of soft rocky. I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way, but like I feel like there's a lot more for them to do, and with the platform that they have now, like the plateau that they're at now, I feel like maybe there's more to go. I just don't know where that would be. I don't know where they could go.
Let's dig into this, because there's very much an anti-soft rock bias among the critics, although I think many of us are secret or not so secret Steely Dan fans.
Well, Fleetwood Mac is the big thing. Everybody's come around full circle on Fleetwood Mac, especially like late period Fleetwood Mac. Everyone's been talking about that for a year and a half. The Vampire Weekend was covering Everywhere, was it, or Lies? I don't know, but
I don't know.
The mid-'80s, everyone our age grew up on mid-'80s total sellout, new wave, Talking Heads, pop, Fleetwood Mac records, which were fucking awesome records. But like if you grew up with Fleetwood Mac thinking of them as like a first-generation British prog blues Grateful Dead type band, that stuff in the 80s was atrocious. It was like Starship. But for us, it was all we ever knew, and Hold Me is like the best fucking song ever written for me. But like, my sisters who are a lot older than me, they look at that and they're like, nah, man, that's when they went totally in the shitter. But back to the thing.
I wonder if there is, because there was a lot of, in the last few years, we've had Fleet Foxes and Sufjan and Grizzly Bear and all these bands who have taken some flack for basically being like, kind of white bread indie or soft rock or whatever. But now it seems like even more people are steering a little more towards music like that with Real Estate. And the thing about Real Estate, they do that with just the little sheen of lo-fi, and they come out of, those kinds of underground labels, and so they have a little bit more cred. But to me, there's nothing different between what they're doing and, what the Byrds were doing, or bands who maybe were not so cool in our little neck of the woods.
I gotta speak to Steely Dan specifically. I grew up just born and raised on Steely Dan's entire discography, even fake and solo stuff. I mean, I love Steely Dan so much. And,
they rule.
And the difference with Steely Dan and a lot of bands from their era, across genres, and bands now who might be trying to inflect that sound, Steely Dan, if you really read Steely Dan's lyrics and you put them against something like kind of fucked up, like William S. Burroughs' writing, they were beats. They went to Bard. They did all this weird, trashy, CD beat stuff. That's what they talked about, essentially. They talked about drugging and boozing and women and sometimes murder and just really kind of fucked up stuff. And Burroughs was maybe the single biggest, other than Coltrane or Miles Davis, maybe the single biggest influence on Steely Dan. People don't get that. And they choose not to look past the veneer of smooth jazz, avocado rock, soft jazz, whatever.
Well, there was a tweet from Anthony Bourdain, Steely Dan expert, the other day.
I remember that.
I just pulled it up. He said, Steely Dan's lyrics were so great and their arrangements so terrible. # easy listening shit.
Right.
And I retweeted him and I said, stick to eating stuff, bro. I don't think he really appreciates, because they were so virtuosic in what they were doing. It wasn't just like, oh, here's a major 7th chord. Oh,
well, he has a point in the sense that what I can draw from that, and I could be wrong, and I'm not speaking for Anthony Bourdain, but what I draw from that is he thinks that the sound of something and the lyrics of something should be generally like lined up, like parallel. So and by that logic, you wouldn't like The Cure, like you brought up, Chris, because their stuff sounds really pretty and nice, but their lyrics are insanely depressing and insanely sad and insanely a bummer. But they sound so pretty and nice and even really happy. And Steely Dan, I think, is kind of the same way. For like the 70s, they belied their music, belied their lyrics, and their lyrics belied their music. Music and lyrics.
I think that's kind of the core of what they were doing, though.
Yeah. They did that on purpose.
They're very much
purpose.
Playing with, yeah.
I remember Chuck Klosterman called Steely Dan more subversive than, in their way, more subversive than the Sex Pistols and the Clash combined. Because
well, the thing, for somebody like kids who grew up in the '80s, and Chuck is kind of a bridge person with the time span, but for me growing up, Steely Dan's rep was like a fucking biker band. Like they weren't. It's not like people thought of them like some lightweight 38 special or like you were saying smooth jazz even. It was nothing like that. They had a balls reputation in the Midwest. It was like, fuck yeah, man, Steely Dan. Like they weren't looked at in the way that kids now are going back and they're being told you need to check out these records. Kids are approaching it just from the Sonics. But that band's reputation was fully as like a serious fucking biker band. Like, Hell's Angels were fucking rocking Steely Dan,
Wow, I didn't know that.
So let's segue. Let's circle back.
Heavy rep, heavy rep.
Yeah, for real.
Let's wrap up Pitchfork Fest. Do we have anything else we want to say about who the best bands were, or how the festival? Because it's a few years old now. It's been going for quite some time.
Yeah.
I mean, has it basically
Steely Dan was the best band
important?
of the fest. No. For me, the best band of the fest was obviously Godspeed You Black Emperor. It was really, we're talking about generational stuff is sort of what we're touching on here. And we can sort of tie it in with what we were talking about and Pitchfork with this. And a bunch of tweeters, a bunch of people on Twitter pointed this out. People under the age of 30 were at Grimes. People over the age of 30 were at Godspeed. And that is pretty much true. I mean, I hate to say that, but that's pretty much true. And Godspeed, I tried to ignore it because it was the first time I'd ever seen Godspeed. I'd been waiting 10 to 12 years to see them. It was like I just slowly, and the one friend of mine who saw me do this can vouch for this, I literally just went glassy-eyed and started walking towards the stage like a zombie. It's like it was a beacon calling me. But it was so, I tried to ignore this. It was so underattended for such a big show and such a big stage. I
saw a couple years ago when Pavement reunited and played Coachella. It was really funny because that was the year everyone snuck into Coachella, and so it was just this enormous sea of people. And on one side you had Phoenix playing, and then on the other you had Pavement playing. And so Phoenix was wrapping up, and I think Pavement was going on, and we got to the front of the stage. And actually Spoon was on before them, so we got up right up front, saw Spoon, saw Pavement, and turned around, and there's this gigantic crowd, on the other side of the field. And it's like, do you not understand what you were missing out on? And they played such an incredible show.
Well, see, I'm a perfect foil to both those observations, because for me, I never liked Godspeed at all. And in fact, I really hated the fact that when I was at Pitchfork, we were backing them so hard. They drove me nuts. I hated them, hated everything about them. It's the same way I hated Tortoise, and I'm not going to get into it and upset anybody. Where I was, I really hated that band. And I hated the fact that I had so many peers that were like, this is the most important music ever made. So then Pavement, right? Late period Pavement to me makes me sick. I was obsessed with that band. I wrote to Steve Malkmus. I have postcards right there that he wrote me back because I was so obsessed with that band through Crooked Rain. And then from about half of Wowie Zowie and then the whole rest of it.
I have to grab my cat. Continue.
Yeah. I was completely done with them. And so, like, the late period where there was this, people in our generation, like you're saying, that were trying to get Pavement to reunite, I was like, why? It's not like they were a great live draw. They were pretty iffy live once Gary wasn't the drummer anymore. When he was the drummer, they were fucking insane live. He was so good. And once he left the band, they just became so fucking boring. And they were so corny, and they had no pulse. Like, he was made of wood, man. And once he was gone, Pavement as a live draw for me was just dog shit. There was no tension. Spiral Stairs was a huge fucking baby. He was so fucking annoying to me without Gary there to, like, equally annoy him and create this dynamic. They lost that. And I just couldn't have given a shit about Pavement after that. So for me, I'm always looking at, like, I don't go back that much, except I guess with The Cure, because I just wrote about him for a week. But, like, the bands in college and in our 20s we were repping, they all kind of faded away from me. And I go back and I look at them and I'm like, what were we so fucking excited about? You know? And
that happens with age. That happens with age, I feel like.
No, it's true. There's no question it does. But I look at a lot of the stuff where, I mean, I don't know, Archers of Loaf, man, I was fucking obsessed with that band for like 2 years, and then I'm like, some of it still holds up, but I feel like I don't understand why they didn't cross over even, actually, because Elektra had them really solidly, and they just... I
heard one of their records, back in the late 90s when I was sort of buying as many used indie albums as I could from the record store, and I think I got All the Nation's Airports, and just couldn't understand it at all.
Dave, what are record stores? I'm so confused right now.
I think you went there and you bought CDs, and then you could sell your CDs.
What?
It was the 90s, man.
Yeah, that you could pay for a lot of beer with that. But that's the wrong record, Dave. You messed up. You need to get Verse the Greatest of All Time. Just download Verse the Greatest of All Time. You'll understand why everybody, was freaking out about them for about 3 years.
Okay. Well, let's since we're talking about, generational music and the divides between what younger people and older people are listening to, so much of the music coverage online is so focused on new music and what's coming out, like right now, this second, that just got emailed to me. But obviously, some sites like One Week One Band, which you just wrote for, are going through the archives, and now especially with things like Spotify and Rdio, people really have access to everything. And I personally think people should go back and listen to that stuff because there's so many classics, and certainly more classics in the last 100 years of recordings than there are going to be, this year in the Best New Music column. So tell us about One Week One Band and what your experience was like writing for that.
Well, Hendrik is just, as far as I know, it's just him and a Tumblr, and he's got this thing going for, a year and a half now, I think. I did week 75 of it. Wow. It hasn't all been gold. He knows that. He was concerned about that, actually, when we went forward with it, because, he's had people kind of say, something came up, my kid's got a fever, I can't do it this week. And he's really trying to, and I think he has created, just with a Tumblr, a platform to do exactly what you're saying, which is get solid, multimedia presentation about a canonical band by somebody who's really obsessed with them, and then it becomes new and becomes a way for kids and whatever adults who've never heard this music to get a completely different perspective, but not just, somebody's diary entry. And that was sort of the tough thing, even back at Pitchfork. Like, I wrote this big thing about the Cocteau Twins once, and one about, like, the Replacements or something. It's just, TLDR, whatever. It's just like a big sheet of words. It doesn't work. You do need the break, and it's very BuzzFeed-ish, but you need the clip, you need the image, you need something to get the whole thing as, a kind of presentation to get people excited about it again. And so 33 1/3, those books, One Week, One Band, these are outlets that are kind of taking shape where people are getting a more updated presentation and a very, passionate presentation of why this particular older band or record is so, revered by, let's say, an older generation.
I guess the big question for me about something like One Week, One Band, which, full disclosure, I did a week for as well, and I think is really one of the most interesting blogs happening right now. Because it is on Tumblr, it's not ad-supported, it's not tethered to the news cycle, and it has become very popular on Tumblr, but those aren't quote-unquote real page views or monetizable page views. How does something like that, does it need to become a financially feasible outlet? And then if it should, which hopefully I would say it should, how does it then become that in a way that doesn't mean it has to generate bands who are going to play at a music festival and then a beer can sponsor it or something like that?
I don't want to monopolize. Do you want to go, Paul? Or?
Yeah. I don't, these days, especially with the economy being like it is and how I'm just straight up desensitized to sponsorship at this point, I don't give a shit. Like, I just don't care if you have, I shouldn't say, actually. At South by Southwest, and Dave and I finally met at South by Southwest, finally.
We did.
It was a lot of fun. But at South by Southwest, you probably saw it this day. It was near the east side, like just bordering the interstate, basically. I saw the Doritos Jacked stage. And Chris, this is everything you think it is right now, I'm just telling you. Did you see this, Dave? Did you see pictures of this?
I saw. It's funny because everyone...
It looks like a fucking transformer.
I never got out there. I actually, when I go to South by Southwest, I actually try to go see like the most obscure, weird bands that I can, and I don't go to any of the big shows. So I somehow never made it out there, which disappointed me.
I was just like walking by it. I didn't actually see anything there, and I remember I was walking down. What was it like? It was probably, I don't even remember. It doesn't matter. But I'm just watching this thing, and I see it, and for a moment, I'm just kind of stunned, and then I start laughing really, really hard because it's the most absurd, literally monument to commercialism and sponsorship I have ever seen, like bar none I have ever seen. And then I start laughing, and then this guy, one of the many guys at South by, loading gear into a van. He's this guy in Mansions on the Moon, this LA band that Pharrell from the Neptunes, I guess, has helped along.
He exec produced their new EP.
Exec produced their new EP,
which is very good.
Yeah. And I remember, and I listened to him after. I remember thinking they were a good band, but he's like the bassist or something. He's loading stuff in, and I remember thinking like, oh my god. I was like, oh my god, can you believe that? Like that's the most insane, like over the top thing. And he said something that'll, I think, forever stick with me. He said, you know what, dude? This is what happens when people don't buy music.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Just
and when they don't buy journalism either.
Yeah. Or when they don't buy stuff, period. And when they get entitled to the fact that just everything's fucking free and why should we have to pay for this and blah, blah, blah.
Well, do you guys think that we need, something like Pitchfork obviously is doing really well and they keep expanding their content. We were talking before the broadcast about their new cover story feature, which we all thought was really great. What do you think we need more sites? Spin just got bought by Buzz Media. It seems like they might, be in some trouble. Do we need more sites that are like 1 week, one band and kind of have more editorial freedom, or are we doing okay as it is? Or is the blogosphere kind of?
No, the blogosphere is the blogosphere is doing okay in the sense that a cancer patient who takes vitamin C is doing okay. It's all these like short-term blip of content things. It's all this like little things to amuse yourself, but you aren't actually getting anything out of anything. I don't want to like demonize people who write in that form. I have, but there's just no substance. It's just most of the time there's just like zero substance. There's got to be a way, and I think Pitchfork has definitely found a way to get sponsorship, make it tasteful. Pitchfork's design alone, makes their sponsorship and their ads and all of this stuff look tasteful and look classy, if that's the word. There's got to be a way to balance, page view hawking and link bait with some actual substance. There must be a way.
Yeah, I look at that, and I'd been talking to some people recently about a book that I don't know if you've read The Gift, and it's been going around for probably about a year. I know Mark Richardson had posted it on his Tumblr, and he was a fan of the book. And The Gift is basically about the struggle when you're compelled to create, right? And so you're compelled to create. Well, if you want to create something, that's just expression, and you need to find a way to to make that a transaction for yourself. And so this book is a way of talking about how your creativity is a gift, and whether or not 1 million people receive that gift or 2, the transaction for you needs to be the same. You need to know that you completed something the way you wanted it to be done, and you presented it to the world, and that's all you're going to get. It's not inherently valuable. So the problem becomes for me, and the reason I don't work for any publication, and this is no bullshit, I don't want anybody editing my stuff. I don't want to be told, like, fucking, you need to cut out this paragraph, or, this band's not really pulling eyeballs right now. Fuck off. I don't give a shit. You're not going to make any money on it anyway. And it's completely fucking ridiculous. They have no choice. If they're a profit-based enterprise, there's absolutely no way they can cover things that do not generate attention. And I had said this previously on my Tumblr. The only commodity that's out there is attention. It's not music. It's the attention around that music.
That's true.
Well, I wonder...
I have to go get my kids more ice cream. 1 sec.
All right. Well, yeah, I wonder because,
I love how Chris goes on these big, like, fucking rants, like, blah, 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 and blah, blah, and, like, me, and I love Chris, and I say this as a compliment to Chris. Me and Chris are such assholes, and Dave, you're such a nice guy.
Well, I do my best.
No, but Chris goes like, da-da-da-da, and fuck this, fuck that. Excuse me, I got to get my kids more ice cream.
Well, it's very Louis C.K. of him.
It really is. It's so great.
I just watched the end of Season 2 of Louis last night and got caught up. Oh, my God. It is such a dark show.
I need to catch up with Louis. I've barely seen anything. The first season
is extremely funny. The second season continues to be funny, but just gets very dark and weird and takes you into really emotionally rough terrain.
Chris, we're comparing you to Louis C.K., Chris. You're welcome.
They weren't listening to me swear, dude. They're upstairs watching, like, Ice Age 4 and eating shitloads of ice cream.
There's a sequel already? That's crazy.
I don't know. It's 20.
They churn that shit out quick.
Dude, seriously, not to do the stupid, dad bullshit, but when you go to a supermarket, once you have kids, it's like fucking claymores of kid DVDs at the fucking checkout line. It's like an $80 spot to even get your shit. It sucks.
Yeah.
Well, fellas, we're hitting the 30-minute mark. So do we have closing statements about Pitchfork / the blog economy?
Abandon all hope, all ye who enter here.
Well, the thing I was going to say before the ice cream incident was that in the early days of the blogs, like 2005, 2006, there were no ads.
Stop. Wait, stop. That's completely fucked up. Because, like, when the early days of the blogs for me is
Not Pitchfork.
No, 1998.
Okay.
Laura.com, me, Ben, these people, like, dude, we were writing HTML in Notepad, uploading it to our website, thegraceperiod.com, my fake band, and, like, I mean, we were all, like, our link page, I'd put, like, 411.org and Burner. No one knows what any of this shit is. But I wrote
I do.
Yeah, you do. So, like, I wrote a thing about this once. At the really earliest point where this became a social communication platform internationally, there was a lot of graphic designers that were driving that because it was like, fuck, you can do that? And so creative types across all the different, practices and mediums, we were all finding each other. And the South by Southwest festivals at those years were like fucking, like, to be young was bliss or whatever the fucking quote is. I sound like an idiot, but to be young was heaven. Those South by Southwest festivals were completely the most insane, aspirational. There was so much .com money being thrown around those 3-4 years from 98 to 01. It was fucked up, man. It was so completely nuts. And it was so different from when blogging became platform-based, which is what you're talking about.
I was going to say, that's what
Blogger
Dave's talking about.
Right. When you get into those platforms where it's a pre-template and then all of a sudden it becomes an idea economy or a thought economy, and we're tweeting.
Or an attention economy.
Exactly, an attention economy. Like I said, you're tweeting and all this stuff, it all becomes about what sticks. So, that I think that the mentality of it now is about stickiness. The mentality of it then was about exploration and figuring out what it was going to be. Because back then, Buddyhead was the site, not Pitchfork.
I remember Buddyhead. I loved Buddyhead so much.
Buddyhead was fucking huge.
I loved it so much.
Rose. They pissed off
everybody. They pissed off everybody.
They got their phone number. They were fucking it up. They could have gone out to L.A. and smoked the whole thing, but they were probably what happened to Buddyhead is what would have happened to Pitchfork if I was running Pitchfork. I would have fucked up. I would have totally fucked up. I wouldn't have got married. I'd be fucking dead. I would have gone on drugs. I would be a fucking in a box dead.
But see, I think of Buddyhead and Chunklet and a couple of other. There are a couple other.
Henry's smarter than those guys.
Henry is, and his wife's a lawyer, and he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But and I love Henry. I've met him a handful of times in Atlanta, and I love the guy to death. But it is interesting there, and there was a distinctly more explorative, fuck it, we can say whatever we want and get away with this shit kind of attitude. And now
remember Indie Shite?
I do vaguely remember Indie Shite.
There was a site called Dave. Do you remember this?
No.
There was a site. Okay, this is back when Western Homes and Yacht Scene and Drawer B and the first wave, when nobody knew what was going to happen in Pillow Fight, nobody knew who was going to win. And Ryan won, Pitchfork won. But back then, dude, that was not for sure at all. There was a clutch of like 10 to 15 different music blogs that we all read every time. And Indie Shite came out with a British registered domain, which was fake, .co.uk. So everyone thought they were English or something. And they came out, and all they did was, I don't even know who did it. It was the big rumor was it was Brent DiCrescenzo. I don't know who did it. I don't think it was Brent, but they would post stuff where they were basically hipster runoff. Let's just cut to the chase. That's what they were. They were the original hipster runoff, and they were taking the shit and taking the piss, I guess, out of all of the budding music magazines like Pitchfork, Media.com.
Right.
Because back then Pitchfork.com sold tractors. And Ryan didn't buy it for a long time because the guy was totally fleecing him. The guy wanted like $12,000 for Pitchfork.com in 2002.
Wow.
Jeez.
Ryan was like, dude, I owe the IRS more than that. Fuck off. But, this is 10 years ago, and nobody even remembers it because now the sense of the whole thing is just like what it was when you turned on cable TV and saw MTV. It's just there's Pitchfork, Spin's getting some stuff going. It really fucking sucks. If they did get bought, it's done.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know that for sure, but to have that happen right after they had the balls to like completely A-bomb their whole thing, and he did such a fucking good job, that really is a fucking shame.
I feel like, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, we'll see what happens. I mean, I was talking to somebody on Twitter about this, how it's sort of the ultimate victory of the blogs because you have the company that owns or runs the ads for Stereogum and Gorilla vs. Bear and The Hype Machine buying Spin. And, when I got started in blogging in like 2005, and it was kind of this big moment of lots of people doing it and doing it a little bit more long form or doing like a song a day kind of stuff, there was the sense that, oh, this is going to like kill Rolling Stone. And then, 6 years later, blogs are terrible, and Spin's still really good, and here we are.
Oh, I don't know.
It's weird. The brands, but the big brands, the legacy brands, they're dying, and they're almost dead. And I think Spin was probably already halfway in the ground by the time it was way too little too late to get Chris in and to get solid staff in. They should have done it 5 years ago. They didn't. They had fucking, Crest Rock, awful MySpace bullshit on the cover in 2006. It was pink and black. I mean, it looked like a fucking Hot Topic magazine. And they just fucking blew it. They were trying to carve out space against Pitchfork's, mode. They should have done exactly what Pitchfork was doing, and they didn't. And now they're trying to, and everyone's like, Sleigh Bells? Fucking so last year.
Right. I mean, their new album kind of sucks, too.
Everything about that band sucks. Everything about you sucks. You're the fucking worst band ever. Fuck you.
You will
big amps. Fuck your fucking total thing. Everything about you is a fucking joke to me.
Well, here's the thing. Wow. Okay. Well, first off, I think Sleigh Bells is like perfectly okay. It's just ephemeral bullshit fun. I don't give a shit.
Grimes is ephemeral bullshit fun. Sleigh Bells is an affront to like everything. They're fucking 10 times worse than fucking Def Leppard or Extreme or any of those bands ever were.
Well, they don't even write riffs. This is my gripe with the new Slave album. Is just like wham, 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 wham. It's like, dude, you played in like a hardcore band. Like, just play some guitar. I know you can do it. It's not going to make you uncool. Yeah. You know, just make it interesting, please. Make it slightly more interesting.
I saw Poison in the Well, the Derek Miller's old band. Like, I'm being from Florida, and I know that.
No shame.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Poison in the Well, I don't know how many times, and I was into hardcore. I mean, like, it's when you understand like the kind of influences that Derek particularly had, and the kind of it actually him doing that makes a lot of sense. It actually does.
He got sick of hardcore being a dead end, scene police bullshit.
Yeah, probably, and
but
also
so did all the like really shitty Boston hardcore bands that went on like and became the explosion. Like, I mean, to do the whole Jade Tree sellout thing, Sleigh Bells is exactly what Paris, Texas was back then. Like all these like just fucking people who couldn't hack it in their scene, and they are so fucking ego-driven that they'll just take that step and go, well, it's okay because I'm a fucking creative genius. I can, you know, put on fucking studded black wristbands and, you know, do my fucking retro video that touches all the right little fucking memes and looks like an outtake from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You know, that's fucking corny as shit, man. It always will be.
Of course it's corny. Of course it's corny, but I just think that's the point of Sleigh Bells. Like, it's supposed to be fashion-y. It's supposed to be corny. It's supposed to be ephemeral.
Here's Carmen. Here's Sleigh Bells.
No, I agree. I totally agree. I totally agree.
They might be giants taking themselves seriously.
Okay, that's all totally true. But I ask, who gives a shit? Like, if it's fun and you can rock out to it, I don't care.
Well, that's the problem for me, is that the new record is not fun at all.
No,
it's like a miserable slog.
Oh, it's so bad. It's so confused. Like, fuck, the new JoJo single destroys everything on that.
New JoJo.
You need to get on that shit. JoJo is back. My girl is on it.
Your kids must love it. Your kids must love it.
I wouldn't let them listen to that. It's really dark.
JoJo. One thing I did want to bring up in the 1 week 1 band discussion, it's very genre agnostic. I mean, my favorite weeks of the blog, there was a week on Blink-182, which was just conflicted and smart and told the story from a teenager's perspective, but then from, you know, being able to look back at that 10 years later, and that was like what I want music writing to be, but you would never see a lengthy essay on Blink-182 or Paramore or any of those kinds of bands on Pitchfork or wherever. So I think it's like I've been writing a lot about some of these current emo pop punk type bands for some of my freelance outlets, and the big secret is a lot of these bands are writing pretty good songs, and they're not any different from Japandroids. They just work with different producers and more expensive microphones, and it's really kind of a bummer to me to see that because of cred or, you know, trendiness.
Waves.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. What differentiates Waves from, you know, I don't know, a band like Silverstein or, you know, one of these like new emo bands on Fearless Records or whatever?
Dude, nothing distinguishes Waves from anything. That kid is such a fucking waste.
I know. Wow. I'm with you on Waves, crashing Waves. That guy actually, I was at a show, a Waves Best Coast thing.
Oh, wait, hold on, wait. Let me shoot heroin so you can take me seriously. Hold on.
Are we talking about Ariel Pink now?
This whole thing just needs to be Chris talking shit about bands. That's what this whole show needs to be.
I wasn't supposed to do that. I was not supposed to do that. And you brought up Godspeed You Black Emperor, and it was like, fucking all bets are off.
Yeah. Because they were at Pitchfork. It wasn't like I was trying to antagonize you.
I was into Sigur Rós back in that era. I'm not listening to any of the like quote unquote post rock bands.
No, Nathan Waves is a really super person. He's a really special person. He has a lot to say and to bring to this world. No, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't at all.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up. I want to wrap up every podcast on a positive note.
Good luck.
So I would love for everyone to recommend one thing that people should listen to or watch or read or eat or whatever. I'll start. My pick for the week is the album Room to Run by this band States. and they are an emo pop punk type band who sound somewhere between Paramore and Death Cab. And they're writing these really catchy songs. The singer is great. And if you could listen to it and try not to think about Hot Topic for 45 minutes, I think you're going to have a really good time. So check that out on your local internet service.
Chris?
Paul, go ahead.
One thing just to check out this week. I mean, this is one thing that I was going to touch on more broadly in the show until me and Chris started exchanging insults or something. I don't know. But
that was awesome.
It was great. Thank you. I'm honored. The idea, and New York Magazine did a thing a while back on this about how, like, basically food or foodieism is the new indie rock or new punk rock or whatever. And eating at Schwa, right after Godspeed, I went up Ashland.
Tell us about Schwa. What's a Schwa?
Schwa is maybe the single most, like, fucking punk rock restaurant ever devised. It seats about 24 people. The chef is Michael Carlson, who looks like he should be a member of Queens of the Stone Age. The whole restaurant's high or drunk when they're cooking and serving you your food. And it basically the space is really minimal. It just looks like a dive art gallery or a dive bar. And it has the most incredible molecular gastronomic, fancy food I've ever had. And for what it is, it's actually quite inexpensive compared to most restaurants of its caliber. And the music they play is completely indistinguishable from PA music at the Pitchfork Festival because the kitchen likes to rock out to it, and everyone's drinking and everyone's acting crazy. And after the cooking's done, I have pictures of people in like luchador masks and hula hoops and like people smoking pot in the kitchen, and it's just this free for all. And it's really not all that different from like a really fun show or like a really fun party. It's, to me, if you really want to experience a art form that is free of free of most commercial shackles, free of bullshit and pretense, you must go to Schwa or a restaurant like it, or like Momofuku in New York, and I'm sure there's an LA equivalent that I wouldn't know about, but. Because there are restaurants like this.
I'm sure there would be, because you hate LA and you're never going to come hang out with them.
Exactly. Yeah. No, but like I think food right now and the whole celebrity chef thing, rock star chef thing, and food as a rebellious art form now is actually a real thing. And I'm so much more engaged with stuff going on in the food world than I am going on in the music world right now.
Well, and the nice thing about food is you actually have to pay for it to eat it.
You have to. Yeah,
it creates a whole environment of people who can write about it and people who can make it and people who can participate in it that actually generates a sustainable economy, hopefully.
Yeah.
All right, one more. Do we have a pick from you, Chris?
We do. And I'm going to preface this by saying, whatever. This is what you need to do. If you're a kid and you're watching this or listening to this, or you're an adult and you have not heard this record, you have to get this record, and I'm going to tell you why. This record is called Singles Going Steady. It is by the Buzzcocks. Most people our age have been listening to it for a long time if they were ever into punk. And to them, it's like an obvious record. It's like the Beatles' greatest hits. But there are shitloads of kids who have never heard this. Added to which, the Buzzcocks have released like 4 other comps, and they all suck. This came out right after the Buzzcocks were wrapping it up. It was a cash-in, essentially, and it was the first American release that got over for them almost at all. And it came out on IRS. And it is 16 perfect pop songs. They're all perfect. Everyone has ripped them off at some point. Every punk band you ever heard, every pop punk band, they're all pulling from this script. And what's fucked up to me is, like, more kids are aware of fucking Stiff Little Fingers because of the movie High Fidelity than what is, like I said, basically the Beatles' greatest hits for so many people who are obsessed with, punk and alternative rock and stuff. We all heard about the Buzzcocks right away from, me reading an interview with Robert Smith in 1987 or something, or you going to a record store, the guy's like, you haven't heard the Buzzcocks? Wake the fuck up. Like, that was on the tip of everyone's tongue forever. It was a band that we were keeping alive. And what sucks is, because they don't want to seem old, or they don't want to say the same thing again or keep talking about the same record, so many critics don't keep talking about important records, and kids don't hear about them. There's a blind spot that can happen when we assume that because we've talked the Buzzcocks to death, we shouldn't talk about them anymore. But we should, because in my experience, a lot of the younger kids, they're looking to us like, what happened? Tell me what happened that was good. And I feel like the hip-hop world is doing a much better job of that than the indie world. I feel like the indie world is just totally immediate now, egomania, and I feel like there's a much better tradition of traditionalism in hip-hop that, you know, the kids that are coming up now are even imbued with it a little bit, and they always kind of defer to the people who influenced them and brought them where they are. You just don't hear that as much with the indie bands, and I think it's a shame. I think we should be way more, historical-centric, whatever the fuck. We should be constantly reinforcing what good music is so the kids get it. And to come full circle with what we're talking about, that's exactly what One Week One Band is doing. And I think it's crucial that you have these, formalized environments where you can go and it's like, you're attending a reading or an open mic or something where this one person is going to unload on this topic or this band, and it's going to help keep that band alive in a way that maybe the band even can't themselves, because like Robert Smith is 54 years old and wearing makeup. Kids are looking at him and they're like, what the fuck is that? That shit is awful, dude. Go to bed. But if you show them where he came from and show them why there are still millions of people all over the world that wake up and put on one of these guys' records, I just think it's as valuable as talking about how good Grimes is or her pussy rings. I don't have one of her pussy rings.
On that note,
I don't want to go to jail.
Thank you to Chris Ott, Paul de Revere for being here today on Rawkblog Presents. We will be back maybe next week whenever something interesting comes up. Buzzcocks, Schwa, States. All right, signing off.